Hey everybody, we are back, and are you waving? Is that
It's
you waving?
been 3 weeks!
It's been
Wow.
2 weeks.
Who are
3 weeks.
people?
Is
We've
it
been
three?
off the air for 2 weeks, meaning that it's
Oh,
been 3 weeks since we were actually doing this.
is that like 3 weeks inclusively, or 3 weeks?
3 weeks elapsed since we were last
Oh
recording,
gosh.
streaming.
Since the last dramatic zoom out.
Yes.
I don't like it when people come back from vacation energized.
I know. It's like when people have a nap and then get up energized, which is such a lie. You just get up feeling groggy.
Yeah, exactly. That's very well said. I have returned to work groggy.
Right.
I have tasted retirement, and I like it. I never want to work again.
Yeah.
And it's obnoxious when people, I'm so energized and ready to get back to work. I am ready to never work again.
The one thing is, if you vacation with young kids and then you come back and you're like, yeah, I'm actually, you get a vacation from that crazy.
Vacation from your vacation.
Yes.
Well, but remember, working from home, I'm with the kids all the time.
Yeah.
I'm kind of screwed.
Same here. Yep.
Wow, I look even more transparent than
You
usual.
look quite washed out. I think that lighting needs to be...
If I were any whiter, I'd be clear.
Get the roadie in.
You're Casper.
There we go.
There's a normal,
Well,
normal Scandinavian.
You need gaffers, I think. I'm not sure what a gaffer does, but I think you need one.
I don't, there's really no possible way for me to be normal. This is my normal color. All right. So we're back. We're out of focus. John, you are in person.
I am in person.
It's going to be very exciting for you.
It's so exciting. It's like, I'm behind the scenes. It's actually, this room it's a set. You guys might not know this. It's a complete, I don't want to spoil everything, but
this isn't real. If I push on this, it'll just fall.
It'll fall right over.
There's people that walk back and forth, and that's their whole job.
Watch
all
for
they
the
do.
boom mic. Just drop it.
They just change their shirt and then walk over.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
So
we're
what's
back.
happening?
Very exciting.
Stuff's happened.
Beta
since we've been
seven.
out.
Here, let's do it like this.
All right.
I've been on vacation. What did we cut between the last couple weeks and now?
Nice. Well done. Well played, sir. So we released Beta 7, which was our first cross-plat release of .NET Core. So up until Beta 7, our Mac and Linux release had been using Mono.
Yep.
As of Beta 7, we had our first drop of .NET Core for OS X and Linux. So that was pretty huge. Beta 7 was a big release. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that happened in Beta 7. I've already spoken about a bunch of the work we were doing in that on the stand-up, so I'm not going to say it all again. Just go and read the release notes. But it was a big release mainly because of the cross-plat work that happened. Beta 8 is what we're working on now. The dates for Beta 8 got pushed out by 2 weeks, so we now have a little bit more time to fit some more stuff into Beta 8. There'll be a lot more cross-plat work happening in Beta 8 coming from the .NET team, including support for more Linux distros. We're also going to be doing a big rationalization of our distribution of our cross-plat and Windows pieces, so we're hoping to do a lot of work on our installers, both MSIs for Windows as well as apt-get/Debian feeds for Linux, and hopefully we'll get to doing PKGs for Mac, as well as having scripts and download. We're going to have a new distribution website where you can download a lot of this stuff. So we're starting to see sort of the end game pieces come in now, including how do you install this thing, what site do you go to get it, that type of stuff.
Speaking of installers, the installation experience can be pretty similar to what it was for Beta 7 on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
So I run the
that
MSI.
will be it'll actually be hopefully better than that. So the Beta 6 and Beta 7 releases, there's been 2 MSIs, which is like you install the DMVM MSI to update one part of VS, and then you install an update to web tooling extensions for Visual Studio, which is this 200 megabyte behemoth of stuff, which isn't just ASP.NET stuff. There's some Azure stuff in there as well. We're looking to split that apart so that you can just go and get the DNX stuff if you just want to write DNX apps. And also, I would then want to get web apps. I want to get a cache of the packages that we produce on a machine. We want that to be an MSI. So if you're setting up an IIS web server, for example, you can install an MSI that gives you DNX in a global location, and a bunch of packages so that your iOS apps can load those.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of work being done around that, and then hopefully a nice download experience and a new distribution channel for all that stuff as well.
Cool.
As well as that, there's all the actual coding going on. Now, as Scott alluded to, we have basically drawn a line under features now. We are effectively feature complete. There's a couple of stragglers that are still being pushed in, but we're effectively not doing any new feature work between now and when we RTM. We've switched completely into we need to get what we've done already working really, really well everywhere. We need to light up the cross-plat story. There's still huge holes in functionality in cross-plat, which both the .NET Core team and us are working towards. Mm-hmm. We're doing a lot of API reviews, so a lot of APIs we're trying to get the last of our API changes in, so that things like renames, methods disappearing and appearing over here will all happen for finality in Beta 8. A lot of features that were in flight have just been cut. We just don't have the time available left to get those features done in a way that we would be happy with, and so we are concentrating on making a production-ready, supportable release candidate for November, as we've been saying now for a few months, and then obviously an RTM in Q1 next year. So I apologize to people if there was some feature they were waiting on that we're now not going to get to in version 1, but that, hey, it's version 1. We do have a roadmap. The roadmap will be updated to extend all the way through next year. And so things that have been cut from the RTM will be slotted into that roadmap. For now, we're just aiming for sort of quarter granularity. So we hope we want to be able to say, hey, this feature will land in Q2 or Q3 or Q4. And then as we get closer to those, we'll pull those in a bit and make them a little more fine-grained. Obviously, the big ones are Signaler, web pages, are going to be Q2 or Q3.
So I was just going to ask, since you can slot so many things in using middleware and NuGet,
mm-hmm.
Can some of those features just kind of come in and
it depends on where those features exist. So if they're web features, like HTTP request sort of features, then you can do them in middleware. Right. If they're host features, like part of the DNX itself, then that's a little harder, obviously. Right. Not everything is pluggable down at those low levels. There's native code that calls into a managed bootstrapper, which then bootstraps your app, and we're still sort of working on that model as well to try and make sure we have a really nice, cohesive .NET Core story that's not just suits ASP.NET, but also suits a wider .NET Core story across multiple platforms. So we're still working through all that now, and we certainly hope to get that finalized as part of Beta 8 and RC. One of the other really big changes that I'm going to announce here for the first time, because I haven't written the announcements post yet, which I will be doing this week, is we're doing a rationalization or consolidation of our host/server story. What that really means is that Kestrel is going to be the only server that we ship now. Did you hear that, Scott?
The only server.
The only server. So now...
I talked to Hunter, and he kind of explained that they got into a room and they said, how many of these do we need?
Yes. So it's not just about the servers, it's actually about the hosts, the part that actually host the CLR.
So Visual Studio, when I run it, like how does that, or IIS Express?
Visual Studio was never hosting. It was always using the DNX anyway.
But when I'm running locally, I'm going to be using Kestrel.
So I'll get to that. So effectively, what we had before is we had the command line host. So you run dnx.exe and you get an app and that boots the CLR. Then we had Helios, which was a separate host that ran in IIS, which then did all these gymnastics to boot the desktop CLR via System Web, good old System Web, and then it would call back in and boot a new app domain, either with the full CLR if that's what you were targeting, or the core CLR if that's what you were targeting, but you would always be left with that first version already loaded. You could never get away from it.
I remember you saying that was a problem you were running.
No, so in reality it didn't actually cause too many problems, but it was another host. There was another set of logic for finding the CLR, finding the DNX to boot, another set of app variable logic, another set of servicing logic that we have to build, because obviously our DNX host supports servicing so that you can patch individual assemblies in the case of security problems, for example, machine-wide. That was another set of that we had to do. And then for things like Windows Nano Server, we were going to build a native module for IIS. So rather than relying on Helios, which still relies on the full .NET framework, which isn't in Nano Server, we had to build a third host, which was a native module for IIS. And then we had Web Listener, which was a server like Kestrel. Okay, so it's not a host, it's just the server that plugs into the command line host. That was just too many. Like, we realized that it was ridiculous to try and duplicate so much of this logic. So we're going to have Kestrel, one server, and DNX, one host. Now, that means in IIS, we still support hosting in IIS. It's just that you'll do that now via the HTTP platform handler. Now, I know that you've blogged about that before, Scott. I was reading up on your blog about it when we started looking at this. And effectively, the HTTP platform handler is a way in IIS to have IIS start another process that runs your application and then proxy requests on the same machine, just between two processes, between the IIS process and whatever process is running your app. In our case, that process will be DNX, because that is our one host, and the server we have will be Kestrel. That means we get to focus all of our server development effort into one server, being Kestrel, and all of our host development effort into one host, being DNX. So that is a fairly large change. We're working with the IIS team who own the HTTP platform handler to make some improvements to that over time so that we can light up new scenarios. It also gives us a nice symmetry between our hosting model between Linux and Mac and Windows, because on Linux, what you'll most likely be doing and what we'll be recommending is you'll stand up DNX.exe running Kestrel, but you'll have something in front of it like Nginx.
Right.
And Nginx will be your front-end HTTP server, which will then reverse proxy on the same machine using process-to-process communication to DNX.exe via Kestrel. Now you'll have the exact same model on Windows. It's just that you'll be using IIS as that front-end.
So, will this use the HTTP platform handler just like you talk to Ruby and Go and?
Yep. It is the same handler. Yes.
Yeah,
that's the one that we already use in production on Azure.
Correct.
Yeah, like you're saying, that's great for symmetry because everybody else on other platforms is going to be spinning up Kestrel and hosting it under something else to keep alive and monitor and all that stuff. So here you've got the same thing on Windows.
You got the same thing. So, I mean, the big thing is it allows us to consolidate our development effort. Now, we're cognizant of a couple of takebacks of that. So we are, as I said, working with the platform handler team to sort of ensure that we still get the features of IIS as required. You can still set up IIS to serve static files. I mean, IIS has this hierarchical application model, so you can always put your static files in the root app, have IIS serve those, and then have a sub-app that actually serves the dynamic parts of your application. You can still configure IIS to your heart's content to make IIS serve what you want, and then have Kestrel only serve what you want. Or you can run it all through Kestrel and just have IIS reverse proxy the whole lot. Wow. Now, in Visual Studio, we'll be doing work to make IIS Express use the HTTP platform handler and boot Kestrel. So the default experience in Visual Studio will still be Control F5 will boot IIS Express, which will then boot Kestrel for you behind the scenes via DNX. So you'll get a similar setup in VS as to what you get in production. You'll also just be able to run Kestrel directly in VS by enhanced support for commands, which is coming to the tooling very soon. So soon you'll be able to drop down the big green arrow in VS, choose the web command or the Kestrel command or whatever it's called, hit Control F5, it'll boot Kestrel for you, and it'll launch the web browser, and it'll look just like you were using web projects previously. So all that work is coming, and as I said, it's a big part of our effort to kind of really consolidate the work we're doing so we can put out a fantastic RC come November. So there you go.
Is there anything that people should worry about or think about? Like, there's lots of different ways that things have plugged into IIS in the past. There's ways that things plug into Apache and Nginx. Like, processes talk to web servers in lots of ways historically, and this seems like more of the way that things have been done in the Unixy world, and away from the kind of ISAPy, ASP.NET-y kind of way. Like, what does it mean in the Helios for Helios and things like that?
So it means we no longer will be shipping Helios.
Right.
No longer be shipping Web Listener. We'll only be shipping the Kestrel server and DNX as a host. In terms of interop with IIS, you're still running IIS. So IIS is still the thing that's handling all the requests. It still runs through the request pipeline in IIS. It's just that when you have this handler configured, requests will be passed through this handler and then forwarded off to the other process, which the handler actually created for you and manages for you as well. So if the process crashes, you can configure it to restart, all that type of goodness. You can still use the IIS request pipeline if you have a handler that you want to run in the pipeline. You still can.
So like a rewrite module and all that kind of stuff.
And if you want to run, you can run it in a app domain. In a what do you call them? An app pool. You can run them in an app pool without managed code. You can literally set no managed code in the app pool and just have it because this is a native module. Or you can turn managed code back on and you can still sort of set up that pipeline to do both if you really want to. We're still sort of getting on board with all this, and a lot of this detail will come out, and obviously there'll be guidance and all this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still IIS. It's just a handler running in IIS that then forwards requests over to the other process, which is running your application. It's not running in process with this integrated pipeline anymore in IIS. But because it's IIS, you can always choose to run code there if you want to. So.
So it doesn't sound like it's anything other than a good thing. It doesn't sound like anyone should be saying, "Oh, wah wah perf," or.
That's well. So I mean, let's be upfront. There will be a perf hit. We are still sort of dealing with, investigating what that perf hit will be. You'll really only see that perf hit if you're doing micro benchmarks, from what we can see right now. If you're getting more than 20,000 requests per second on your IIS server right now, then you might potentially, on a machine like we have here, then you might look at issues. But I don't think many people are actually running 20,000 requests per second on a single server for a real site. So I don't think you're going to run into actual issues there. If you're running a benchmark, yeah, you'll see a definite drop-off because now you've got 2 processors handling every single request. But as I said, in production, generally, more often than not, there is more than one machine involved with handling the request. If you're running in Azure, every web request hits a front end first running application request routing in IIS, which then proxies back out to one of many different web workers which actually run IIS to handle your request. And then within inside that, there may be more than one process handling your request as well. So I wouldn't get too hung up about the fact that by default we're now using this model, because in reality, in real sites, you're generally proxying across multi-servers and even multi-networks. This is not going to be your bottleneck.
Cool.
So we have a bunch of questions that have come in. Do you want to show some stuff first, John?
Why don't we take some questions and I'll set up to share?
All right.
Because I've got it.
So, question: how many people actually work on ASP.NET at Microsoft?
That's a good question.
Pardon?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we get that question quite a bit, actually.
Well, because when people ask that, they mean a couple different things, right? They want to know how many engineers are there behind that fake cardboard wall.
Yes.
But then they also want to understand like the total organization size.
Yeah, so let me answer that. So let me ignore program managers because there's only 4 PMs who work on ASP.NET. I manage them, and then there's 3 people under me. Then for engineers, we have, let me think, in the DNX, like the core team that does DNX, there's probably about 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. Then on MVC, I think they have about another 8 again, maybe 7 or 8. Then, well, that's pretty much it for the runtime components. There may be 2 or 3 extra who do things like the security middleware and a couple of the other little pieces. Then we have an EF team who does Entity Framework only. That team is approximately 6, 7, 8 people, I think. And who am I forgetting? DNX Core is the same as that. It's the same as that. And then MVC. That's really the runtime team done. So what, if we add those 3 together, maybe 25 if we're lucky. And then we have a tooling team who does the editors in Visual Studio, the project system, the scaffolding in Visual Studio, a bunch of other work like that. They have, I can count them by looking through the fake wall here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this room. And then in this room over here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 or 7 over there. That's about it. So not that many. And then there's obviously some managers, like some dev managers who manage those teams. In the runtime, we have 2 dev managers or 3 dev managers. On tooling team, we have 1, 2, 3 dev managers as well. And that's about it. And then there's the .NET team who does .NET Core CLR and the .NET BCL, all the framework packages. And that team's a little bit bigger than our team. So I don't know whether that's bigger or smaller than people expected.
I think it's smaller than people would think.
Every time I talk to people, they're shocked at how few people build all this stuff.
I think people assume a couple hundred.
Yeah, no. I mean, again, if you talk about the greater, like if you include the .NET team in that, you're probably getting up to over 100 people, including all the managers and that type of stuff. But if you're just talking about the ASP.NET team, it's quite literally 2 rooms here. Then there's the NuGet team, which is separate again. They run a live site. They do the NuGet client. They're in this room as well. But yeah. At the top, are webhooks that got released last week somehow linked to Beta 7? No, the webhooks that were released last week are in no way related to ASP.NET 5. My understanding is it's built on top of Web API 2, okay, which was what was released last year. Say I want to create an independent MVC middleware in another assembly. Is there a way to isolate those controllers, not auto-discover them in the main app, from the main application controllers and say mount them in a custom URL prefix. So you're that's a very large question that talks to the concept of componentization of MVC, whether it's componentizing a view or a filter or a controller. There are some new features in MVC 6 that enable this a little better than in previous ones, but it's not. We don't have a full multi-tenancy story yet in ASP.NET 5, and we won't with the first release. But I can't give you specifics on an answer. That type of question is best asked on the MVC repo. Just log an issue with that question and let the MVC team answer that. They'll be able to answer that better than anyone else can. And they can give a more in-depth answer than I can give in this forum. What happened to the dependency injection implementation of autofac and inject? Were they pulled due to breaking changes? If so, when will DI stabilize, and have some examples of how to use it? So what happened is when we built out our DI system, we built implementations for autofac and inject as a way to prove the extensibility of our DI system. We never intended to ship those as supported by Microsoft. What we wanted to do is have the autofac team and the inject team and the structure map team and the MEF team and the et cetera. We wanted them to own the DI glue for ASP.NET 5. Now, my understanding is the autofac team has done that, and there is an autofac for ASP.NET 5 package. I believe an inject has done the same thing, but that's why we don't ship them anymore, is because they have been taken over by the respective community teams. Scott, can you just mark the answered ones?
Sure.
Sorry, I think we're down to the third one here. Are you guys going to attend
DockerCon?
DockerCon? Didn't that just? Oh, DockerCon Europe. Okay, so DockerCon just happened not that long ago here. I'm not aware of DockerCon Europe. If anyone from my team is going to DockerCon Europe,
probably Dan Fernandez or John Gossman would be there. We could ask.
Yeah, well, Dan Fernandez has now changed teams.
Oh, he's changed teams.
Yes, but Dan, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Razunovich is there. I don't know. He was at DockerCon here, so I honestly don't know. I'm just totally spitballing. But I imagine that at least one person from Microsoft will be there, if not a team of them. But I'm not sure anyone from my team.
Well, but actually, that question brings up kind of a more interesting thing that you could talk about, because you mentioned the size of the ASP.NET team, and then a container question came up.
Yep.
Which isn't necessarily something that we are doing. We, the ASP.NET team, which is different from the people who are interested in containers, which is because there's the tooling for containers, there's the there's the runtime and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to be clear, we're involved in the container work in that we own the ASP.NET 5 Docker image. We test and ensure that the Docker image for Linux and the one for Windows works with ASP.NET 5. It'll be one of our supported development and deployment models, but we don't build the container technology. We just liaise with that team as like we do the Windows Server Nano team, as we do the IIS team. So yeah, even though our team might not be as big as some people expect, we are sort of, I guess the way to think of it is we're an app model, and so in a lot of ways we're where the rubber hits the road when it comes to a lot of these other supporting technologies. Very people just use IIS directly. Generally they run an app in IIS using some other app framework, whether it be Node or ASP.NET or PHP or something else. Similarly, you don't really just use containers for the container's sake. You run something in a container. We are one of the things you may run in a container. We build on top of .NET, and that will run inside of a container. So there are layers here, and the teams are divided up into those layers, but ultimately, as a customer, you need to figure out how to put all those things together, and we need to help you do that in the most effective way and make sure our stuff works. So, I think that second one we talked about that one already.
Yep.
The third one, have you tested, where'd it go? Have you tested to generate ASP.NET 5 web app using Yeoman Generate ASP.NET on Windows 10? Because I get Beta 5.
They're saying the Yeoman generators are not updated to Beta 7.
They are. The Yeoman generators have been updated in step with Beta 6 and Beta 7. So if you're having a problem with those,
maybe update the generator.
So we do. Syed updates the generator. He owns coordinating the generator stuff. That's part of our release sign-off. So we update the generators as part of every release.
And so they're mentioning a specific issue, and it's looking at Windows 10, so we'll need to look at...
There may be a specific issue being followed up there, but we certainly do look at those issues, and we do sign off on that as part of every release, so it should work. Any plan to have support a .NET room at... I don't even know what that is.
OSDEM?
Anyone know what that is?
Nope.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what that is.
FOSDEM is a big free and open source. It's like a bigger, more wacky OSCON in Europe, and
Okay.
I don't think we've got anyone there.
Okay.
Because we're not, I would say this to people who want to know about things like FOSDEM. This time next year, I think we would be actively involved in that kind of thing. But without a Linux runtime that is in production, there's really no reason for us to go there yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Any news about debugging .NET Core and VS Code? Not yet. It will be in an upcoming release. That's all I can say. They're working hard on it.
I would think that now with the cross-platform shipping DNX
Mhm.
or .NET Core, that's like an impetus where that's.
It is. I mean, that's obviously there's a lot of forcing functions and blocking there. Yeah. Like the things have to happen in a certain order.
Right.
And one, we need the app to run on .NET Core first.
Yeah.
And then two, the .NET Core runtime on Linux and Mac has to support debugging. Like the debugging APIs have to be there and not explode before we can actually ship a debugging story on .NET Core. Those things are happening in those steps. We just released the first .NET Core runtime, and we did a whole bunch of work in that release just to be able to do things like restore and then run your application on Mac and Linux. And obviously, profiling and debugging and all those things will come on board later on. We have answered the second one there.
Yep.
By
The
Eric.
dependency injection one?
Yep. The controller one. And and the one under that. Yep.
When is DNU publish output going to be solidified?
Seems to be duplication in there. I'm not aware of the duplication they're referring to. DNU publish doesn't. I'm not aware of any duplication there. We have a list of packages. There may be an app package if you choose. No compile. There's a runtime section if you embed a runtime, and then some CMDs. We'll still be tweaking DNU publish, but I'm not aware of any major changes that are.
And if you target multiple platforms, you'll of course get.
You'll get multiple runtimes. Yeah, I mean you'll get multiple runtimes, but the runtime in itself can't be split apart. It's a one cohesive unit.
Yeah.
So you'll always get more than one of those. If you choose to put more than one in, you have to actually tell it to do that. But I'm not. If there's only something specific you have, please log an issue on the DNX repo. Will it be possible in VS to stop debugging but still keep IIS Express and the web apps running? This was possible in MVC5, but I can't. No. The reason you can't, that question pertains specifically to if you use F5 to launch in a debugging experience. I mean, personally, I never, ever, ever, ever do that unless I'm debugging Startup specifically. I always control F5 and then I attach, mainly because of this issue, but I've just done that for 10 years. The reason is because when you start the process with debugging, it turns on extra features. It enables different things. And because of the way that we boot IIS Express, via DTH, the design time host, and then shuttle bits across, we can't reuse that process when you stop the debugging experience, which is why it gets shut down. So I tend to control F5 and then attach. I tend because, frankly, it's much faster as well. I don't always want to debug. Generally, I want to just run, and then I look at it, and then I go make some changes, and then I hit F5 in the browser to refresh the page, and then I only attach, Control-Alt-P, attach the debugger to the process when I need to actually do some type of step through or inspection debugging. But generally, I just launch with Control F5. Any new behind-the-scenes talk on markup minification? I'm still using Gulp and looking for line termination characters. So we discussed that specific issue. The issue was punted about adding line termination because we determined that there were going to be a lot of other issues that were run into. It wasn't as simple as just adding line termination. That was going to be a Pandora's box. We will, right now, you could inject into the Razor sort of compilation phase. It's not pretty, but you can do it. You can inject in your own chunk generator or your chunk visitor by replacing certain aspects of the MVC Razor host. And that would be the correct way to do it so that the minification happens at compile time, not at runtime. We are not going to be improving that pipeline for V1. We just don't have the time. For V2, that's one of the things that we're looking to do is open up that compilation pipeline in Razor and make it a little bit more pluggable. But right now, we don't have any real improvement in the story for running minification on top of Razor views. Now, to be fair, we never really have at all. I mean, we're into the 4th version of Razor now. We've never had a minification story. People have done it with response filters in the past, which does it at runtime on the resultant HTML. You could do something very similar. You could write a middleware that buffers the output by wrapping the outgoing response stream and then minifies the HTML on the way out. In fact, you could probably find code that used to do it as a response filter in ASP.NET 4 and adapt that to run in ASP.NET 5 because it's still just a stream API. That's not going to give you fantastic performance because you have to do it at runtime on the stream itself, but that's a trade-off. We think the correct way to do it is do it at compile time when the Razor view is compiled into C#. It is possible right now, it's just not pretty. We hope to improve that in the future. Damien and John are attending Web European conferences at Milano next 26th of September.
Not that I know.
I will be there.
First I've heard of it. Scott will be there. Okay. How to control probing on ASP.NET 5 via config file or using code. If they mean assembly probing, you can't. ASP.NET 5 and DNX takes over the process of loading assemblies. That's how we're able to do things like load assemblies from NuGet packages at runtime. It's how we're able to do things like compile your application on the fly at runtime, because when the CLR says, hey, I need this assembly, we go, oh, I haven't compiled it yet. Let me compile it for you and hand it over to you in memory. We don't use a bin local deployment model or runtime assembly model. There are basically, if you look in the code for the DNX, there's a loader model, there's a package loader, and a project loader. The project loader is the one that can compile your app. The package loader is the one that can pull assemblies out of NuGet packages. It's not really pluggable right now. It's kind of baked into the DNX. You can always fork it and change it and compile your own DNX, which isn't that straightforward. Hopefully it'll be easier in the future. But the concept of probing, as I understand it, doesn't really exist in the same way as it did in the traditional .NET framework.
So, I mean, is that something like a binding redirect type of thing? Is that what he's talking about?
No, I think he's talking about probing paths. Like binding redirects were explicitly about saying when you want to load this assembly by this name, please load this one instead. But by this name, you don't put it in a different path. You give it a different identity.
Got it.
Probing was about like fusion logs and what paths are looking, that type of stuff. Could you talk about what role the feature collection APIs play in the new runtimes? How do they relate to middleware? So the feature collections, there are two. There's a server feature collection and there's a request feature collection. And they do pretty much what they talk about, what it sounds like they do. They are a collection of features that describe what's available on the server, if you're looking at the server feature collection, or on the request/response, if you're looking at the request feature collection. The web server populates a bunch of those, and then middleware can also populate those and implement those features as well. It's a way for us to have an open pluggable model for adding features to servers and requests so that we don't have to have a static request API that changes on every release, so that request.blah, request.this, request.that, or response.that changes from release to release. We can have a core set of APIs, and then we light up extra features through a feature collection. And you can get those features out of the feature collection by type, and of course a feature or a middleware is free to add extension methods to make it easy to pull those out of requests as well from that request context object. If Kestrel is the only host that is shipping, DNX is the only host, Kestrel is the only server, just to correct that naming. Does this mean Web Listener is going away? Yes, that's exactly what it means. Web Listener is a server, not a host. Kestrel will be the server that we ship because, as I said, it lets us focus all of our effort around one server that works cross-platform on Windows and on Linux without us having to effectively code two servers. The community obviously is free to develop as many servers as they like, as people do on other web platforms. Generally, one ships with the platform, and then people are free to ship, develop and ship other ones. We'll be shipping Kestrel, as it's the one that we can make the most change to, because it builds on top of a socket API, so we implement the HTTP part of it ourselves, which means that we can do a lot of work to improve that, whereas something like Web Listener, which is built on HTTP sys, now to be clear, HTTP sys has a lot of fantastic features. We can't change much about that. HTTP sys does all the work. It's a kernel node driver that ships in Windows. Okay, so when you want a new feature to do with HTTP, like HTTP 2, you wait for the new version of Windows. People who are complaining about why we don't have HTTP 2 support, it requires Windows 10 Server because it's implemented in HTTP sys, which is a kernel node driver in Windows. With Kestrel, we can support HTTP 2 because we own the socket. Okay, so it allows us to do things that are more flexible, and it means we can ship the same server cross-platform.
Just to add on to the questions as they come in, what about like a host? If I want to host Kestrel in my own process or something, I'm basically proxying over to it the same way that IIS.
Right. So to be clear, in ASP.NET 5 and DNX, there is no traditional self-host model. You can't write a custom exe. with DNX. DNX is a hosted model, just like Node is a hosted model. You run node.exe and pass in your app. You call dnx.exe and pass it the root of your application, generally a folder. Okay, that means you can't really build your own exe. Okay, so while it's self-host in the sense that you're not hosting an IIS, it's not self-hosting that you're running your own executable.
Right.
Right. You're running our exe, which is a native bootstrapper, that then points at a web server, which is a managed implementation, which in this case is Kestrel. So if you want to have a custom exe, you can. You could stand that up in front of DNX and then proxy to DNX, just like IIS will be doing with the HTTP platform handler. Will we be able to select local IIS in the debug settings when RC launches are we tied to RC Express? Yes, we are implementing support for full IIS in the web tooling. That will be coming in a future VS release, and it will be there. I think it's currently slated for the RC release. If not, it'll make it by RTM. I have not seen any documentation on OData in MVC5 Web API, but it's still coming right. So MVC5 was the previous version. I'm not sure if they mean MVC6 Web API, which is the ASP.NET 5 version. I apologize for the versioning. There is no planned work right now from this team for OData in MVC6 on ASP.NET 5. I can chase up whether, actually I'm not sure whether the OData partner team has started work or is doing work. I'm just not privy to those plans right now. But if that's what they're referring to, we can look up that and get back to you on that, or you can ask that question on the home repo on GitHub, and then it'll be tracked rather than me having to remember to do it. Lastly, I've been looking through, another one turned up. I've been looking through release notes for Beta 7. I know you have mentioned resources before, but could you mention where I should ask about upgrade problems? Should I log GitHub bugs, issues, specifically unable to locate Kestrel with DNU restore? So that bug specifically was because we renamed the Kestrel package in Beta 7, which was announced in our announcements repo. So when we do a release, what you need to do is go to the announcements repo, click on the issues, and then filter the issues to the current release, in this case Beta 7. That will show you all the breaking changes that we documented as part of that release, and one of those was we changed the name of the Kestrel package, which is why you're seeing that error, because there is no Kestrel Beta 7. It got renamed to Microsoft.ASP.NET.Server.Kestrel or something like that. So make sure you check the announcements repo for that stuff. Scott mentioned 1 or 2 stand-ups ago that he'll be doing or may have already recorded a Microsoft Virtual Academy on ASP.NET 5. When can we expect this to be released? Yes, Scott, when can we expect that to be released?
It should have been the last week, but again, I've been on vacation, so I haven't been sitting on them. But now I'm back, and I will go sit on them. As I understand it, they were just doing the what's it called, the transcoding of the stuff. So actually, I'll chat the guy right now.
Okay. And lastly, maybe this one will stick. What I mean, John.
He was clarifying.
Oh, okay,
the
great. Damien explained. Thank you. So I think we're good.
All right,
John.
let me share some stuff. All right, so is it sharing? I think so. And I already Control Plus it. Okay, so here's the post Daniel did about ASP.NET 5 Beta 7, walking through the different changes, all that good stuff there. That in here, there's the Angular controllers, there's CoffeeScript, there's all kinds of.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Somehow you keep getting muted.
Okay.
When I switch over to, it's Damien who gets muted. You're muted. And when I switch over to you, you go away. So
that'll be because it's muting me, I guess, and we're sharing the same mic.
Okay. Well, just be watching, Damien. Be watching yours, because for some reason, as John talks, I'm not touching anything. It's auto muting him. So just be aware.
Oh. Okay.
Start. I guess I'm saying start over.
Start over. All right. ASP.NET 5 Beta 7. This is Daniel Roth's release post. And so there you go. Lots of good stuff. The OmniSharp generators updated for ASP.NET 5 Beta 7. And just a reminder here, there's a lot of good stuff in there with, not just simple controller, kind of stuff. There's, Angular. There's all sorts of great scaffolders in there. Jerry Pelser built this cool thing for ASP.NET MVC 5 which was this OAuth providers. So there was already OAuth provider support in ASP.NET MVC5, but he did a lot of stuff that plumbs in specific things. So specific like name identifiers and things like that. So you get actual the best support for each provider. Yahoo. There's tons of them. So Jerry's calling for support for a rewrite that they're doing for ASP.NET 5. So this is a really cool thing, especially if you're if you know a lot about a specific OAuth provider. This is a great thing to get involved with. Damian Bod wrote up this post on ASP.NET 5 with SQLite and Entity Framework 7. So cool to see an implementation here with SQLite, and he's got a repository out there with some source code. So this is a nice up-to-date post on that. Rick Strahl did an interview on ASP.NET vNext on .NET Rocks. So this is was just listening to it this morning. This is a nice interview. I always like listening to Rick, and he's very straightforward. Some stuff he likes, some stuff he doesn't, and he's always fun to listen to. Let me see. James Chambers has been doing some really cool stuff. He's been continuing to dig into specific DNX commands, so writing your own custom commands. So this is one where he's writing about supporting options and arguments in your own custom DNX commands. This seems like a really cool way to really extend the process and make DNX work the way that you want. So this is a cool thing that he's digging into. And finally, Taylor Mullen did a 1-hour thing on Webcams TV. So this is on Channel 9, and so this is an update on tag helpers. And that is it for me.
Awesome.
Magical.
Yep.
Cool. That's a lot of stuff for 3 weeks.
There's actually a lot more. I trimmed it way down.
Cool. I just got off the chat with the guy from MVA. It'll be out on the 14th, so Monday.
Okay, awesome.
So that probably means Tuesday.
Okay, a week from today then.
So hopefully we will be able to put it into the community links on the next one.
Okay, great. Well, that's subtle. That was nice.
That's Scott's new avatar with the teeth there. That was great. Don't look at me smile.
Oh dear. Okay.
Oh dear. Oh dear. That's the episode name. Oh dear.
Oh dear.
All right. Cool. Prepare the dramatic zoom out.
It is ready to go, sir.
All right. Engage. Bum 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 bum.